everyone. From my couch in Blue Springs, Missouri, it's time for CIMM Sessions again, our little bite-sized servings of theology, culture, and community of Christ, identity, mission, message, beliefs, and practices. I'm David Lloyd, the director of CIMM, a Center for Innovation in Ministry and Mission, through the Graceland and Community of Christ Seminary. We have a great program for you tonight, done in a different format than what we've done in past CIMM sessions. Last Saturday, I was at the Colonial Hills congregation and was able to videotape Joey Williams, who is right now a president of 70, soon will be a member of the Council of 12. It was great to be with Joey last Saturday. This is part one of a 5-part program that he did called TED Talk, Preaching in a Time of TED Talks. And you'll get a little taste at the beginning here of his introduction to this. Next week, we'll show part 5 of that, where he really talks about how TED Talks work and how they connect also to preaching. And eventually, we hope to have all 6 parts of this put together in a program that will be available for people who would like to look deeper into their preaching ministry. And it will include people like Linda Booth, who was with us the last 2 weeks, and a number of other people who are still yet to be up and on with us. So I want to prepare you, first of all, if you have something to write on during this session, it might be helpful. We will use the chat feature on the side to, if you'd like to share there with the rest of the group some of your thoughts. We will have time where we'll pause as he's having the group do discussion. That's time for you to also mark down on your piece of paper your thoughts in regard to it. If you'd like to share that with the rest of the group, you can do that in the chats. And we'll just kind of experience this like the class did a few days ago. Now, I also want to let you know that the beginning of this video starts a little bit quiet because Joey starts from the back of the room. I've tried to add some text boxes so you understand a little bit what's going on, but he will eventually get up to the microphone and you'll hear him clear as day once he gets there. So for now, I'm going to turn it over to the program that Joey Williams did last week. So hold on just a second as I set that up.
For the kingdom of mercy, bring forth the kingdom of peace, bring forth the kingdom of justice, bring forth the city of God. Can you feel it? Can you feel it? Can you feel it? The story that was told over and over and over as I was growing up was that apparently I was 3 or 4 years old. I was at a camp and powerful words had just been spoken to all the youth at that camp. And apparently when my father finished his talk, it went silent. And I was playing in the back of the room, and this little boy, 3 or 4 years old, apparently starts walking down the aisle, just saying, "Can you feel it? Can you feel it?" The words that we speak matter. The words that we hear told about ourselves, the stories that people tell us, matter. They begin to shape everything about us. And the words that we let in that are negative shape the negative parts of ourselves. And the words we let in that are positive shape the positive parts of ourselves. How do you think hearing that story as a little boy, being told these words that I was saying, "Can you feel it?" How has that shaped my desire to continuously seek a relationship with the Spirit? Just take 2 seconds to go around your table And share, if you can think of some powerful words that have been shared with you, spoken to you by others. What are words that made a difference, that mattered? Go.
Next few seconds, those of you who are watching on Sim Sessions, write down the words that made a difference to you that someone said in a sermon or something along the line, and who said them, and how did they say it? So just write those things down.
So let's just hear a few popcorn ideas that were at your table. What were the words that were important spoken to you? Glad you're here today. Just that invitational welcome. Encouragement. Good to see you. You matter. Thank you. Yeah, appreciation. Great words. The words we speak matter. So what is a TED Talk? TED Talk started in 2006, and by 2007, do you know how many views they had? How many do you think? In 1 year, 1 million views. By 2012, they had reached their 1 billionth view. And today, TED Talks receive about 3 billion views a year. So what is it? The essence of a TED Talk is an idea. In fact, it's stated right in their slogans. You can go to their website. When you used to go there, this is kind of their old website, but you used to go there in the top left-hand corner, you get the gist of what TED Talks are about. It says, and you probably can't read it, but it says ideas worth spreading. So the basic idea is that it's an idea and it's worth spreading, but they've updated it. You know, we've always got some team working on a new slogan. So now it says ideas change everything. Look at that. It's even more powerful in their new slogan. Ideas change everything. In fact, the owner of TED, who is Chris Anders, believes in the power of an idea. He says, you have something meaningful to say, and your goal is to recreate your core idea inside the audience's mind. Okay, where does that idea have to be placed? Yeah, so your idea has to be transferred. Somehow you have to get the imagination of the idea you have to ignite and incite the imagination of the people you're talking to. This idea that Anderson talks about, he believes, is the gift that we find in every great talk. That's what we have to offer, is this idea that can maybe empower others to change everything. Of course, is Chris Anderson the first person that thought of sharing great ideas, or the idea that an idea might change things? No. In fact, whether it was on a mountaintop, whether it was on the plains, by the seashore, or even out in a boat, Jesus had quite a few novel ideas of his own that he thought might be worth sharing. He thought even if people kind of got the gist of this idea, it might just change everything. And what did Jesus call these ideas? The good news. He had good news to share, and he thought the good news could change everything. The ideas that Jesus shared must have been so compelling, so convincing, so relatable, people were willing to leave everything to turn and follow him. How many points did Jesus make in his most famous sermon? What was his most famous sermon? Sermon on the Mount. How many points are in that sermon? Blessed are the, right? 8 points. Jesus has an 8-point sermon, but actually, Jesus' main idea can be summed up in just 2 points. The message that Jesus shared everywhere can be summed up in 2 points. Love God, love your neighbor. Just 2 simple points. The simplicity of Jesus' focus when Jesus spoke made it simple for people to understand and even apply to their own lives. In Mark 16, verse 15, Jesus then asks his disciples, go into all the world and preach the good news, which was this idea, to everyone. Share this idea with everyone. So as we become spreaders of the good news, we take it upon ourselves to pass it along in our communication with individuals, families, groups, and even congregations. Communication is key. We often get the impression today that sermons are a little passé. Have you ever heard somebody say like, oh, here comes the sermon? Or gosh, is that person going to speak? They think it's going to be what? What do people say about these passé sermons? They're boring. They're going to be way too long. Any other things people say about them? Dry. It won't be funny. Maybe not relatable. Well, according to a 2017 Gallup poll, they beg to differ a little bit. In fact, they had 1,526 adults that were polled, living in all 50 states. 745 of them said that they went to church regularly. That means at least once a month. When asked about 7 different factors, so there was kind of a list of different factors of why they go to church, 3 out of 4, what percentage of that is? 75%. 3 out of 4 noted that sermons or talks that either teach about scripture or help people connect religion to their everyday lives were the major factors contributing as to why they go to church. So let's look at some of the factors in that study. I'll read through them in case you can't see it from where you're seated. So 76%, the very top rating, 76% were sermons or talks that teach about scripture in general. So a teaching type of sermon. 75% said sermons or lectures that help you connect religion to your own life. So those sermons that just really kind of help you, oh, this is what I need to do with my life. Next were 64% was spiritual programs geared towards children and youth. So if you're looking for what does your congregation need, apparently it's good preaching, good teaching, and programs that are for your children and youth. And then 59% community outreach, volunteer opportunities, 54% dynamic religious leaders, interesting and inspiring. 49% said social activities that allow you to get to know people in your community. And then the lowest on that list of factors was 38% that said you needed a good choir, cantors, people that could sing, and spiritual music. So it appears that the spoken word still has a major place in why we gather, when we gather, and what we expect to do there. Not only sermons are a big reason why people go to church. In general, people who go to church and listen to sermons say they're pretty satisfied with what they hear. Isn't that interesting? So what I find interesting in this study, and hopefully you can see it a little better, but all of that blue on the two big things on the left, I'm actually not paying attention to that because that's the major part. What I find most interesting is that only very small percentages on the right were not at all satisfied or not very satisfied with the sermon. It seems that almost 92%, 91, 83, in all the different types of religions that were surveyed there, that over 90% are pretty satisfied with the sermons that they're hearing. So people seem to be pretty okay with it. When you're like, oh, nobody wants to hear what I have to say, actually, people are probably okay with what it is you have to say. So communication is always key. The entire goal of a TED Talk, speech, or sermon you might give is to communicate to the listener, your idea to the listener. But good news, or the ideas that we are sharing, need to be more than just a theme or a topic. It actually has to be a good idea. So let's look at an example of this. Empowering women. Is this an idea? Or is it a subject? It's a subject, it's a theme. So 2 summers ago, I had the opportunity to go to Toronto, where we have a program called Encounter World Religions. Who's heard of it? Yeah, and they have this thing called Discovery Week. And over the week, you go to 14 different religions. You study them for like 2 hours, and then you go out and you visit a religion in its place. You go to a synagogue or a mosque or all different types of places. And you learn about different religions around the world. One of the observations and comments that kept coming up was about women's empowerment. And actually, what the observation was, there seems to still be a lot of patriarchy in a lot of these religions. What should we do about that? So Brian Caruana, who runs this program, was so good because he doesn't have any, he doesn't share any biases. He just teaches all the material and tells you about the different religions. But he did at the very end of the week mention this. He said, with all of the time that I have watched and teached about different religions and seen what might make a difference for women's empowerment, it would be this. Whenever we get girls or women involved in sports, it seems to begin to dismantle patriarchy. So I started to think about this idea, and I wondered maybe there is an idea in this point or subject. So the idea I came up with was this. Give a girl some running shoes, and one day she will run the world. Give a girl some running shoes, and one day she will run the world. Now that's an idea. So ideas aren't just these general truths either. This is a general truth of Community of Christ. Unity in diversity is important. What are some other general truths? We call them principles, enduring principles. All are called. This is a truth that we've come to know. God still speaks today, continuing Revelation. Worth of all persons, right? These are these general truths or these principles, these ideas that have lasted over a long period of time. So unity and diversity is important, but how could we maybe think about this as an idea, something that might capture people's imagination the way it has mine? I thought about eating foods from different cultures may not only help you love your neighbor, it might just save your life. What do you think I mean by that? Well, there's tons of data and research to tell us that when we sit across from someone different from us and share a meal, we begin to feel closer to that person. We begin to have empathy for that person. The fact of tasting different types of foods can physically change the inside of our bodies, right? We know that there was a time when people in some countries, like in China, people were not very tall because they were eating the same types of foods all the time. And where were the tallest people 200 years ago? When you think of tall people, where did they come from typically? Europe, and where in Europe specifically? The Dutch and Germans, right? They're known as tall people, but the Dutch were kind of the tallest in the world, or Kenyans from Nairobi, right? Tall people. And why do you think that was? What were the Dutch good at? What did they make? They made cheese. That's maybe the best answer because it's delicious. They made boats, right? They were the ones responsible for going all around the world. They were the center of all the commerce for the whole world at a point, or it seemed like it, that they were kind of bringing in all the spices. They were going around the world and bringing in everything that made their food diverse, and that created, taller people. Same for Kenya. Nairobi was this center point for all of Africa, where all of these different types of foods were coming. So literally, it might just save your life to have a meal with someone from a different culture. Wouldn't that be an interesting idea to develop in a sermon. So let's take a look at the Sunday themes for 2025. And this is in your handout if you turn the page. So what you see here are themes, they're topics, general subjects for you to talk about. Some of them might have an idea in it, but I'm not sure. I think more of them are subjects or themes. So at your table, I want you to take a few moments to try to turn some of these without even knowing what the scripture is, without knowing what that Sunday is about. How can you go ahead and turn this theme into an idea? So go work on just a couple, maybe get 2 or 3 from each table of what is an idea from some of these themes. Go. So if you're needing like help trying to come up with that, how you shape or structure that idea, one easy technique, and not all ideas have to be this formula, but you can do the easy technique of if this happens, then this happens, right? So if you eat diverse foods with people from all around the world, it might just save your life. Then this will happen. So the if then is an easy way to construct that, but it doesn't have to be. You can come up with all sorts of big ideas that are not in that formula. I'll put the last one up on the screen so you can have an idea. So let's hear some of the ideas. Let's hear some of the ideas that you came up with at your table. So first, tell us what is the subject or what's the theme for a certain Sunday, and then what did you do with that theme? Who wants to go? Yeah. Make room for emerging life. When a safe environment is provided, growth happens. Is that an idea? How could we take that a little further? What were you thinking of? What story were you thinking of when you said that? Like, when have you seen that happen? A safe environment created. Yeah. What about babies aren't meant to be born in trash bins? Right? Is that an idea? Like, do you want to listen to my idea after, if you hear that? So if you could think about a time when you've seen maybe a not so healthy, safe environment for a child, and you bring that into an idea, not only do you have now an idea to share, but you got a story to tell with it. What else?
Belong to Christ and never go hungry.
Belong to Christ and never go hungry, right? What's another way that we could say that? What's an idea there? Like, you're developing your idea in that, but I'm trying to think of what's that idea that's just going to really grab people.
Never go hungry.
Okay. I like that. Oh, oranges or apples? Which one are you choosing? Or I've got Jesus in my deep freeze. Let's hear another one. Are you getting where I'm going though with this? Of the idea is more than just developing the theme. The idea has to grab people. It's going to be worth sharing. You know, it's worth telling people that healthy environments are really important and safe environments.
But I do remember when I stood in front of the congregation, I'm married, been married for a long time, and I said to the congregation, I have a new love in my life.
Oh, so stand up in front of the church and say, I have a new love in my life, even if you've been married for years. So when it comes to preparing our sermons, we start with an idea that needs to be worth sharing, an idea that can make a difference. So you might think, well, sermons have been sharing these types of ideas for over 2,000 years. What could a TED Talk actually teach us? So Charlie Reeb, senior pastor at the John Creek United Methodist Church, just north of Atlanta, Georgia, he has been focusing on sermons and in his leadership training and preaching at his congregation. And they've seen really big growth, sometimes significant growth, just because of the way they prepare their sermons. He's written several books. I'm going to give you a few of the titles that I like the most. That'll Preach. I like that. Say Something. At least say something. And in that book, he talks about how important it is to talk about, say something that matters. And then Lose the Cape, which obviously is about preachers not being the heroes of their own story. He believes we need to pay attention to TED Talks in today's age of preaching. And he says it this way: since we have been called by God to communicate the most transforming message in history, we must continually work at honing our craft. I can't think of a better way to do that than to learn why TED Talks are so insanely popular. For Reeb, the idea doesn't just necessarily have to be new. What makes sharing the good news effective today is communicating familiar ideas in new ways. So we know this. Many of our sermons are the same idea or even the same theme, the same scripture over and over. Every 3 years, we start repeating many of these scriptures. But sometimes it's just a familiar idea said with a new twist to it. Because have you ever told a story about delivering a baby? Right. So we can use a same old story that you probably talked about with your colleagues over and over again, but now you bring it to a new context and you share this new idea. So with this in mind, let's go a little deeper with TED Talks. What makes them good? Communication expert Carmine Gallo, in his book, Talk Like TED, he believes that he's cracked the code as to why TED Talks are being watched 3 billion times a year. 3 billion. How many times every second is someone starting to watch a TED Talk? How many people every second? Well, how many seconds are in a year? Okay, I'll do the math for you. It's 95 people start watching a TED Talk every second, if you break down that math. 95 people. He says they touch our hearts, teach something new, and present ideas in unforgettable ways. So think about the best sermons you've ever heard. I bet they had these elements in them. I bet they had emotion. Something spoke to you and you felt something in that talk. I bet they had novelty. Something new was being said. Maybe it wasn't a new idea, but at least just a new way of talking about that subject. And I bet they were memorable. There's some reason today you're going to, at your table, go, oh, this is what I remember. You're going to share it again. It was memorable because it had something in it that made it memorable. So emotion, novelty, and memorability. Take just a second at your table to share about a preacher or someone who spoke that had at least one or more of these qualities: emotion, novelty, and memorability. But also, if there's other qualities you want to bring up about that person, share those qualities too. And this isn't a time for long stories, but just kind of share, what was it that captured you about this person? Was it one of these things, or is there another quality you want to share? Go. So were there Were there any qualities at your table that were shared that go beyond this? What are some of the other qualities that you heard about people beyond emotion, novelty, and memorability? Visual examples. Yeah, I heard a lot of people that were somebody used yo-yos back here. Vulnerability. So authenticity, vulnerability, those are important qualities as well. Challenging assumptions. So maybe somebody was defending something in a different way. Or the surprise. Ooh, I like that. Surprise. Well, in addition to novelty, emotion, and memorability, TED Talks also need to have these three things: an interesting idea. We've already talked a lot about the idea. A concise presentation. Now, that doesn't mean, oh, it's too long. It just needs to be concise. All the information needs to be in there. So if it needs to go longer for the information, well, then we need to keep it interesting, but it needs to be concise. And good visual aids, which someone just brought up. So there needs to be something new, this interesting idea, even if it's just a new spin on a familiar topic. It needs to be concise. TED Talk speakers, they seem to know what they're talking about. They're professionals, basically, in what they're speaking about. And maybe as preachers, we can't be professionals, but we can do the best that we can in the research that we do. And then visual aids need to be attractive, relevant. They need to have good fonts and make it easy for people to actually see them and relate with them. This lady, Amy Cuddy, she did a talk called "Your Body Language May Shape Who You Are." It's one of the most viewed TED Talks ever. 69 million views right now that it has. The idea that body language is a nonverbal way for others to understand you, that's been around forever, right? That your nonverbal messages, people can, they can get things and see things about you whenever you use nonverbals. But the idea that I not only can learn from my own nonverbals, but my posture, my body movement, the way I position myself and use my body may actually shape who I am. That's new. That's a novel, new idea. Let's look at some ideas of more ideas of this big idea, interesting idea. So everybody's been to a youth camp, or they've heard a sermon or a talk about a youth camp. Everybody's got a great testimony of some youth whose life was changed when they went to a camp. We know that youth camps can change children and youth's future, their lives, and even the world. But the idea that it only takes one campfire to spark a lifetime of purpose, this is telling that same old story in now maybe a little bit different way. This is that idea to capture that. Let's try another one. The Easter story. Every Easter we hear women go to a tomb. What do they find? The tomb is empty, right? We hear that in churches all over on Easter Sunday. So a few years ago, I came up with the idea with Jesus isn't here. Get out of here. Go back to the Galilees of your life. There you will find him. Same old story, new idea. It's not when we gather in this space that Jesus becomes present with us. It's when we leave this space and go back into our regular lives that we carry that message and work into our world, right? Same old story, but maybe just a different little way to present it. So let's hear Amy's novel idea about body language. Also notice that she's going to get to her idea probably in the first minute of her talk. You don't want to linger a really long time before you get to what is it that you're going to get out of this talk.
So I want to start by offering you a free no-tech life hack. And all it requires of you is this, that you change your posture for 2 minutes. But before I give it away, I want to ask you to right now do a little audit of your body and what you're doing with your body. So how many of you are sort of making yourselves smaller? Maybe you're hunching, crossing your legs, maybe wrapping your ankles. Sometimes we hold on to our arms like this. Sometimes we spread out. I see you. So I want you to pay attention to what you're doing right now. We're going to come back to that in a few minutes. And I'm hoping that if you sort of learn to tweak this a little bit, it could significantly change the way your life unfolds. So we're really fascinated with body language, and we're particularly interested in other people's body language. We're interested in, like, an awkward interaction or a smile or a contemptuous glance or maybe a very awkward wink or maybe even something like a handshake.
Here they are arriving at number 10 and look at this lucky policeman gets to shake hands with the President of the United States. Oh, and here comes the Prime Minister of it. No.
So they have to be interesting. She gets to her point in 1 minute, and then she gives you some pretty good examples of that. They have to be concise and clear presentations as well. Tan Don, he's in a TEDx. So these are like mini TED. It's like on your way to an actual TED Talk. But there's even more of those than there are actual TED Talks in the world, because there's all these TED Talk wannabes. And that's why we're here today. We're preacher wannabes. So when he talks, and it's very interesting because English is his second language, but he's going to give this really good intro about why it's important to be clear and concise. And those two are not the same thing.
Hi everyone, my name is Tan Don, and my presence here today is utilized in the purview of reinforcing the notion that we should speak more concisely. Now, would you rather hear that, or, hi everyone, my name is Tan Don, and I'm here today to prove to you that speaking concisely is better than a mess I just threw at you.
So what is he helping us understand from the beginning? You could be concise, but not clear at the same time. He was very concise with those words at the beginning, but the second time, just using simple language made the clarity, and it was also still concise. So those were all important. Visual aids are important as well. Pictures or images that enhance your message can be an effective tool for your presentation. This is David Epstein, who is using attractive imagery when he talks about sports, and the images that he uses really give power to his words.
The Olympic motto is Citius Altius Fortius, faster, higher, stronger. And athletes have fulfilled that motto rapidly. The winner of the 2012 Olympic marathon ran 2 hours and 8 minutes. Had he been racing against the winner of the 1904 Olympic marathon, he would have won by nearly an hour and a half. Now, we all have this feeling that we're somehow just getting better as a human race, inexorably progressing. But it's not like we've evolved into a new species in a century. So, what's going on here? I want to take a look at what's really behind this march of athletic progress. In 1936, Jesse Owens held the world record in the 100 meters. Had Jesse Owens been racing last year in the World Championships of the 100 meters, when Jamaican sprinter Usain Bolt finished, Owens would have still had 14 feet to go. That's a lot in Sprinterland. To give you a sense of how much it is, I want to share with you a demonstration conceived by sports scientist Ross Tucker. Now, picture the stadium last year at the World Championships of the 100 meters. Thousands of fans waiting with bated breath to see Usain Bolt, the fastest man in history. Flashbulbs popping as the 9 fastest men in the world coil themselves into their blocks. And I want you to pretend that Jesse Owens is in that race. Now close your eyes for a second and picture the race. Bang, the gun goes off. An American sprinter jumps out to the front. Usain Bolt starts to catch him. Usain Bolt passes him, and as the runners come to the finish, you'll hear a beep as each man crosses the line. That's the entire finish of the race. You can open your eyes now. That first beep was Usain Bolt. That last beep was Jesse Owens. Listen to it again. When you think of it like that, it's not that big a difference, is it? And then consider that Usain Bolt started by propelling himself out of blocks, down a specially fabricated carpet, designed to allow him to travel as fast as humanly possible. Jesse Owens, on the other hand, ran on cinders, the ash from burnt wood, and that soft surface stole far more energy from his legs as he ran.
Did you see how those visual aids were really important? And what else did he use? Sound. He used auditory aids as well. So you might not have the resources to get this level of visual aids that you just saw, but it doesn't have to be that complicated with pictures and things like that. It can be simple. It's really just having really attractive and clear typography. So we're going to see in Kirby Ferguson's talk on embracing the remix, where he's talking about music, just how effective just simple white on black or just a nice font can really help your presentation.
We're going to begin in 1964. Bob Dylan is 23 years old, and his career is just reaching its pinnacle. He's been christened the voice of a generation, and he's churning out classic songs at a seemingly impossible rate. But there's a small minority of dissenters, and they claim Bob Dylan is stealing other people's songs. 2004, Brian Burton, aka Danger Mouse, takes the Beatles' White Album, combines it with Jay-Z's The Black Album to create the Gray Album. The Gray Album becomes an immediate sensation online, and the Beatles record company sends out countless cease and desist letters for unfair competition and dilution of our valuable property.
Did you see just how easy it was just to put a little white on black to make it really effective and clear? So we have emotion, novelty, memorability that we've also just talked about with an interesting idea, a concise presentation, and good visual aids. These are all elements that need to be apparently in a good TED Talk from the research that I've done.
All right. Well, that was the first part of Joey Williams' preaching in a time of TED Talks. And I'd invite you at this time to share any of the key thoughts that you thought were part of this presentation as he introduces the idea of what a big idea is, how to give a concise message, and how to add some punch to it. So if anything that clicked with you today, go ahead and write it in the chats. And I'm going to just tell you how this presentation went from this point on. The next 3 sessions, Joey spends time in an exegetical process of how to take the scripture and look before it and after it, above it and below, as he talks about what the big idea of that scripture happens to be, and connecting it to stories that are along your own personal life experience. But I think the message that he really came across strongly with, and I really appreciate it. Joey would be with us tonight to chat with us, but he just a few days ago left for Africa and is in Africa, where they don't have that great of a connection tonight. But the idea of taking the big idea and the concise presentation and then forming it around the scripture and having something to say as you start out your presentation, as you start your sermon. I think these are really important points as we look into how we are crafting our sermon experiences. Let's see what some of the folks here have said. Communicate a familiar idea in a fresh way. I think that's a lot. I think one of the reasons why the TED Talks work so well, too, is because it's interesting information. It's something that I would like to hear more about, that story about the racers and how close they were to each other, when we think that our human beings have come so far, and yet not so far when you hear that little click sound there. How does that relate to the story of his work as a physician and working with people who are in the sports area? Let's see, the big idea we used to call the hook, the hook, a way to draw in the listener to catch their attention from the onset. I think the hook is still a real thing. What is the thing that's going to tell the people that they want to listen to you? We'll also find out as Joey goes on a little bit further that those first 7 seconds of our sermon will determine whether or not someone thinks we're credible, thinks that we know what we're talking about, and how intelligent we are. And believe it or not, intelligence is shown by how you smile, how much you smile at the beginning of your presentation. Who knew? But important keys as we look at that hook that we want to bring in when we first start the sermon. The 6 keys of a good sermon are emotion, novelty, memorability, and a good idea, a concise presentation, and good visual skills. That's from Joy. Thank you for those notes, Joy. Catherine says, even without technology for visuals, using your words to draw the picture. I think that's a really good point. How do we create a picture in the listener's mind? I heard someone start out a sermon in regard to a story of Jesus, and they started it by telling them what was surrounding Jesus at that particular time. It was early in the morning, and they just finished breakfast, and the still smell was coming off of the grill from what they had eaten, and into the silence there breaks the sound of a woman being thrown down at Jesus' feet to be judged by him. You can create these imageries of the scriptures that we're talking about. Let's see. Know when to speak, know what to say, and know when to shut up and sit down. I think that's and it's a good point for those of us who are making a sermon to also recognize that the length of time that a person is speaking is in every other experience in life is usually no longer than 10 minutes. The commercial break experience on television. How long is the presentation and then a break and then a presentation and a break? And how can you break up that presentation as you go through it so people don't get bored with the presentation and sit down when it's time to sit down? Let's see. Humor always helps keep interest alive and helps the hearers to remember the point of the sermon. Thank you, Janice. Ruth and Larry, I hope there is going to be discussion about how priesthood people remain in touch with the Spirit and the scriptural knowledge to help listeners feel the Spirit's presence in their lives. Yes, we will be doing a 2-part series later in the series where Tony and Charmaine are going to take us through the exegetical process of getting to know the scriptures from the aspect of how we preach on them, getting to know what's being said in the scripture and the background and explanation that we can give to the listeners of what the real intent of that passage would be, and also the awareness that we are dealing in a medium of spirituality and the importance of our preparation, not only in the sermon but also our preparation in being connected to the Spirit. Let's see what else. TED Talks are done without scripts. Yes. In fact, Joey will talk in the next section next week about how it's important for us to get away from scripts. I'm going to talk about that also in my session a little bit more of how we can put a framework on paper or on a computer and get away from it, but still keep our place in line. I know a lot. The difference between my wife and I in our preaching is I go without any, well, no, I don't. I can't say that. I go with very little notes, and she goes with a whole presentation. And we both have to work to get away from that in order to connect with our audience. Let's see, sharing personal, memorable testimonies. Yeah, no scripts. Somebody says, yes, it is scary, but we'll talk about there are ways that we can work around this. Well, this is our first dive into Joey's class. Again, next week, we will go into part 5, which really deals with how TED Talks are set up and how they relate to what we're doing in sermons. The 3 parts in between this one and the one next week will be available in the future. Again, they're mostly on the exegetical process, and Tony and Charmaine are going to be dealing with that in the later presentation. And so we will get through all of these points that Joey went through, but we will return next week with part 5 as he talks about the nuts and bolts of getting a sermon off the ground and being something that people want to listen to.